Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to my channel. Today we have a very, very long video, so if you are not comfortable, I highly suggest getting comfortable, especially if you're going to be staying through this entire video. I don't like to post videos that are this long. We are getting close to like the 27-minute mark with this video, and I know that that's like really, really long. I hate doing this, but this is kind of like a mansion build, so obviously mansions are a lot more work than your typical house home in The Sims 4, and the reason that I actually did not cut this up into more than one part is because this video itself kind of serves as a part 2 to the mystery machine, which you can tell is kind of facing forward in the front of the lot here. If you missed that video by some chance, I did the mystery machine the other day on my channel, so I am doing Scooby Doo week this week, and the first thing that I had in mind to build for Scooby Doo week was obviously the mystery machine, and I've been on this kind of kick where I've been interested in building vans and cars and campers and stuff of that nature. And when I did my Wild Thornberries camper a few weeks ago, I decided I wanted to attempt the mystery machine. So I did a whole video just on that and decorated the interior and did like the whole thing. It's livable. Currently you cannot access it, but at the very end of this build I am going to add stairs to the back of the mystery machine so that you can get inside of it and play around. But that's kind of part 1 of this video. Part 2 is this mansion that I'm building. So this is a spooky mansion that comes from the opening scenes of the original Scooby Doo cartoon. Every single episode obviously opens up with the theme song, and they always start it by showing this spooky castle that I don't believe is ever named in the show, but when I googled it, it did come up right away, so it's obviously something that people are somewhat familiar with, and I just kind of thought that it was really iconic, and I wanted to try and build it because I had this idea that I wanted to do a Scooby Doo week because I think it fits really well into Halloween, obviously, and I have already done Creative Sim videos. I have another Creative Sim video coming out after this one, but I wanted to build a really famous location from Scooby Doo. Originally, this was actually going to be the house that they stay at in one of the Scooby Doo movies. I think it's the one that has the Hex Girls in it that I talked about in yesterday's video, but I decided to go with this one because I thought that it was just a little bit more generic. And the reason I wanted to go generic is because I wanted to use pretty much whatever I wanted to in the interior. And thank God that I have The Sims 4 Vampires, because Vampires comes with so much stuff that is perfect for these kinds of builds to do, like abandoned houses or spooky apartments or spooky castles or things like that. So I did use a lot of cobwebs. I used a lot of the plants for the landscaping. All of the interior is designed with old school furniture like candles and things that are a little bit more old school in nature, which is awesome, and one of the many reasons that I did pick up The Sims 4 Vampires, even though it does seem to be one of the least favorite packs amongst people. I think that the build and buy mode objects from that are super, super useful, especially around this time of year. And I'm currently also building in Forgotten Hollow, which is the world that you get when you get Sims 4 Vampires. And if you happen to not have a copy, I'm actually doing a giveaway on my channel currently, so if you click down in my description box below, or you just go onto my channel, you will see that I recently posted a video where I'm talking about giving away a copy of The Sims 4 Vampires, so if you don't have it, you can actually enter to win, and the only requirements are obviously that you are subscribed to my channel, and you have to have the base game of the game already installed because you cannot play The Sims 4 Vampires without it. So that way, if you go over and you enter and then you win, you can download this build and you can build lots of stuff for yourself. And I really just wanted to give away like lots of spooky stuff this month on my channel. I haven't done a giveaway in a while. It's kind of a thank you for 1,000 subscribers thing, and it's also just something that I felt like, I don't know, the older I get, the more that Halloween seems to be my favorite holiday, and I say that, but around Christmas time, I'll be like, oh my God, Christmas, Christmas, Christmas. But Halloween is like slowly just becoming one of my favorite things. I love when all of the decorations come out. I love that the Spirit Halloween stores open up and you can go to those little pop-up shops that sell all of the costumes. I love looking online and on social media and seeing what other people dress up as. And I like can't wait to have children for one of the sole reasons of just making costumes for the kids because I love to make costumes. I wish that I had more places to go around Halloween because I think I could make some really banging costumes for myself, but I just don't go anywhere on Halloween. I tend to stay home, and that is just a tradition that has come over the years and come of being older, but it did not always used to be that way. And actually, this is the first year that I have my own place and I could throw some kind of a Halloween party, so I'm debating it. I've been thinking about it, and I'm not quite sure what I want to do with that yet, but I do tend to stay home. I tend to just get a lot of snacks, and we don't live in a location where people are going to be coming up to our house to trick or treat, I don't believe, so that's not something that we really partake in either. And even at our old house, that wasn't something that was really going on in our neighborhood, because both times we've lived on like main major roads, and obviously people tend to trick-or-treat inside neighborhoods. So actually, since this video is so long, why don't I tell some stories of some trick-or-treating things that happened to me, or just like trick-or-treating stories, because I did go trick-or-treating for most of my life, like probably longer than your average person. I just loved the idea of getting candy, and I know that I was just a little bit of a late bloomer. Like, I didn't really see it as that I was too old to trick or treat. And I remember actually getting comments in the later stages of trick-or-treating from people whose houses I walked up to, and they would say things like, "Oh, did you guys drive here?" And at the time, I didn't really understand what they were talking about, but they were implying that we were too old to be trick-or-treating, which I guess in retrospect, we definitely are. I kind of don't agree that that's like a great thing to do and like to make people feel bad for continuing to trick-or-treat even if they're like 11, 12, 13, 14, because it kind of is one of the safer options of things to do on Halloween, because obviously I think once you hit like 14 or 15, you do opt for like a Halloween party, and that obviously cannot always be the safest situation. So I think that like in retrospect, trick-or-treating when you're a little bit older is like super, I don't know what the word is that I'm trying to get, like innocent, I guess. And that was probably it too, that I was just so innocent that I didn't really even look at it as that I'm too old to trick-or-treat. But I did notice that maybe my first year in high school, people were not talking about it anymore. Nobody was like, "Oh, I'm going trick-or-treating." So it was just something that like I knew I was going trick-or-treating, and I always went with my sister and my two cousins, but I just didn't talk about it because I knew that people were kind of out of it, but I was like, no, I'm still going. Like, it's free candy. It is so much fun. It was exercise. It was just like a tradition that I had done for so many years. And obviously you get very attached to things like that. So I didn't want to give it up. And I remember I want to say freshman year, I went trick-or-treating, and that year was, I think, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, but that was the first year that I had gotten a costume that traditionally, I didn't really get costumes that were from stores. I usually ended up making something because Halloween costumes are really expensive, like ridiculously expensive. And my parents were never down for that. They never wanted to pay for Halloween costumes, which I completely understand. And that year, I decided I wanted to get a real Halloween costume like everybody else always had. So I ended up paying for it myself, and I ended up ordering it. And I was ordering it from a website where maybe the costume was a little bit more adult than I should have been wearing, I guess, at that age. So when I got it and I tried it on and I was wearing it, I was immediately like, I knew that it was probably a little bit more of an adult costume. At the time, I was probably, I think when you're a freshman in high school, you're like 14, maybe a little bit older. I don't really remember. Somewhere around that age. I was kind of embarrassed because I knew that it was not a costume that like somebody my age should be wearing, but I couldn't go back because I had already spent all my money on it. Like, that was what I definitely had to wear. So I ended up wearing a sweatshirt over it for most of the night, which, I mean, originally I had thought it wouldn't be a big deal because usually, at least where I am on the East Coast, it's very cold on Halloween night. So you typically end up wearing other jackets on top of your costume, which totally ruins your costume, but it's just something you have to do. Like, I've been trick-or-treating in snowstorms before. It's just so cold, and you can't get away with like these little outfits that are like short skirts and like knee-high socks, like running around. You can't wear them. So I was like, oh, I'll just wear a sweatshirt. It'll be fine. And of course, that year was the warmest Halloween that we have ever had on the East Coast. I swear to God. So it was too warm to be wearing a sweatshirt. And I had a boyfriend at the time who we were meeting up with in secret. And he was actually going to come trick-or-treating with us. And the only reason it was a secret is just because I didn't usually tell my parents about anything going on in like my personal life or my school life. I just always have had a disconnect between things that have been going on with me at school and things that my parents know about. I don't ever like talk about it, or I never did talk about it when I was in school. It was just not me. So I was meeting up with my boyfriend, and I remember being like very self-conscious because first of all, I'm wearing a costume that I know is like out of my age bracket. Second of all, I'm meeting up with my boyfriend, and it's like the first boyfriend that I ever had where like I'm going trick-or-treating and we're like meeting up and it's a secret thing. I had to tell my cousin not to say anything to his family members, and I had to tell my sister like, keep this a secret. Not that it was a big deal, but it was just something I was always weird about at the time. And when I walked up to him, the first thing he said was, why are you wearing a sweatshirt? Because it was too warm. And I remember feeling so embarrassed and so wishing that I had just made a costume like I always had made every single year before that. Because when you make your costumes from scratch and you go to like the thrift store and you piece together a bunch of stuff, you get to pick every single part of your costume. So if something doesn't fit, you can pick something else. If something's too warm, you can pick something else. If something's too short, you can pick something else. So you get to make all of it, and it really helps to like make the costume fit really well for you. And when I was that age, I was also just really self-conscious. I'm not anymore. I used to be very, very uncomfortable in my own skin, I guess. And the older I've gotten, the more that I just realize it so doesn't matter. And I am less uncomfortable in my skin than I was at that age, as most people are very like uncomfortable in their skin at that age. But regardless, that is a memory that has always stuck with me, because when I think back on it, I get kind of embarrassed of just like how the whole thing went down and how stupid it was. And let me see, another one that I have is that, I don't know if anybody ever did this. Comment down below and let me know. But my cousins and I and my sister used to trade costumes when we were done trick-or-treating. So we were in this neighborhood that we always went to every single year. My grandmother lived up in like this really nicer kind of neighborhood, and there was different options for where you could go as far as trick-or-treating. There was like mansion kind of houses, and there was like little houses, and you could decide if you wanted to go to areas where the houses were like a couple of yards in between each house, or they were kind of packed right together. And it made trick-or-treating different every year. You got to go to a different place every year, but all still kind of stay in the same area. So what we would do is we would always go trick-or-treating, and then we would go back home for a little bit, trade costumes, get a drink, and then go back out. And normally it worked, because obviously you have to imagine when you are somebody who is giving out candy in one of these neighborhoods that is so full of so many kids that are coming up to your door, like you're probably seeing at least 50, 60, 70 kids that night. You might not remember every single one of them, and that's the way that we always thought about it. So we would just go home and trade costumes and like make our costumes into new stuff so that we could go back out and get more candy, obviously. But one year we went to a house after we had traded costumes, and the lady kind of looked at us funny, and she gave us this look, and she was like, haven't I seen you guys already tonight? And we were so embarrassed, because obviously like you're not supposed to do that. So we were just really mortified that we had been figured out. And of course we played it off. We were like, no, we have not been here. Of course not. And she did give us more candy. I think she knew exactly what we had done, and I'm sure that there are other people who also do that. I remember actually walking down the road and trading costumes with one of my cousins as we were walking, and we were literally trading like shirts or something like that. Like we both had tank tops on, and we just switched our shirts so that we were wearing each other's costumes opposite. And some of her friends walked up in the middle of us doing that, and I remember seeing the look on her face of like how embarrassed she was that that had happened to her. I don't know why, but that stuck with me throughout the years as well. Oh, and also something that I always had as a tradition for when I was younger. I feel like I've told this story on my channel before, but I probably did it a really long time ago. So most of you who are currently subscribed have maybe not heard it before. But for the first probably like several years of my life, obviously when you're younger, your parents pick your Halloween costumes. So I was a lot of things that are very traditional, like a bumblebee or an M&M, or just like things that they think are adorable. And they kept my costumes throughout the years. It's not like I remember any of this. It's just something that they kept around, and I obviously have seen pictures and things like that. But when I was old enough to pick my first Halloween costume out, I decided I wanted to be a genie. I don't really know why, and it's not like there was any particular reason, but I just thought that they were really, really pretty. So I remember being at the store and picking out my first costume, and it was a genie, and I think that it was a blue genie. And there was something about it, I loved it so much that I would be a genie every year for like the next few years to come. So probably I would say at least 3 or 4 years in a row I was a genie every single year, and every year I was a different one. But it was just my thing. Like, I would just go as a genie every single year, and it was my thing. So it was something that, like, everybody knew that I was going to do year in and year out, and every year I would just go to the store, find a different one. And this is when I was, like, a little bit younger because, like I said, I stopped buying costumes from the store because they get too expensive. The older you get, the more material they're selling you, so obviously they're going to jack the prices up. So probably for 4 years in a row, I was a genie. And at the time, one of my cousins who I always went trick-or-treating with, we kind of had this weird rivalry between the two of us. And I think everybody kind of experiences this in some capacity with some other family member in their family. Like, when you get together around the holidays or when you get together for some kind of occasion, there's always that one person in your family that pushes your buttons just a little bit, and you're not really sure why, and you kind of compete in this weird sort of way, and it's not really like ever spoken about, but it's just something that goes on between family members. I don't know why. Maybe it's just something that happens in my family because my family can be like absolutely insane, and we had this really weird rivalry between the two of us. So like, it was almost like we were competing costume-wise, so like when we would get together or when we saw each other, we would compete about grades, or we would compete about friends or sports or popularity or anything like that. And so 4 years in a row, I go dressed as a genie for Halloween. So of course, like on the 5th year, no surprise to anybody, I show up again as a genie, only to walk through the door of my grandmother's house and see that my cousin that I kind of have this weird rivalry with is also dressed as a genie of a costume that I had worn previously, like an identical costume. And that's something that, like, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you go to like the Halloween store to look at costumes, a lot of times the costumes are the same that they were last year, and they just kind of tweak them maybe a little bit here and there to make a new costume. So I remember like walking in and being a blue genie. And I walk in and my cousin is like dressed in this purple genie costume. And I remember absolutely losing it because that was like my thing and she knew it was my thing. And it felt to me, especially when I was young and like naive, that it was totally a stab at like me. Because we had this weird thing going on. It was like rivalry between the two of us. And then she knows I'm going to dress as a genie. So what are the odds that I show up and she's dressed as a genie as well? And of course, like looking back on it, it's just something that she wanted to do. Maybe she was even like inspired by me, obviously, at the time. So it was something that like, if it happened to me now that I'm older, I would be like flattered. But when it happened, it was so detrimental. It was so scarring. Like, I remember just crying and being hysterical and being so angry and making a huge deal about it because I thought it was so mean that she would do something like that, especially because I was just right around that age where you're like in middle school and things like that so matter. It was like showing up to a prom or a dance and you're wearing the same dress as like another girl that you're not particularly fond of. It was like totally felt like that, and it felt like she had done it on purpose, and I thought she was so evil. And that's just something that to this day, I don't know why, but I have not been able to forget about it. It's just so weird, the things that you remember as you get older. I don't think I really have too many more Halloween stories just because, like I said, the older I got, the more that I liked to stay home. And I have gone to a couple of Halloween parties over the years, and they're not really my thing, especially like gathering in rooms full of people that I'm not really friends with. It's not super awesome for me. I always like to do parties with like my closest friends, like my closest guy friends especially. We'll all get together and make a mess of a house and just have the greatest time. But it's so much better when you're like completely comfortable and surrounded by people that you know. I'm not a huge fan of going to these big house parties that like you don't really know people walking around and they are trying to talk to you and you're like not super familiar with them. But in the video, we are actually onto the interior now, and like I said before, I decided I wanted to use nothing but old school stuff. I wanted this house to feel very, very old and dark and creepy, as it should. So I used almost entirely stuff from vampires, all of the stuff from spooky stuff, a couple of things from seasons here and there. When we got seasons, we actually did get quite a few items that are Halloween themed, so I did end up using some of that stuff, but I really just wanted the whole house to feel like very old. It's obviously very livable. I did go ahead and do like everything you would need to actually use this house if you wanted to play on this lot. I think it would be really cool for vampires to live here. This would be a really cool replacement. What I actually did is bulldozed that house that is up at the top of the Forgotten Hollow lot, and it belongs to one of the vampires from that pack. So if you wanted something new or revamped to put up there that kind of still fits into the theme of Forgotten Hollow, you can download this off the gallery, and I think it would make a really good replacement. I did a library, kind of like a living room area, a kitchen, one bedroom, one bathroom, and then I did this weird kind of middle area where I didn't really talk about it, unfortunately, when I was furnishing it. But I just thought it would be this room that would be for... I was going for more like witches when I was doing this mansion. So I felt like there would be a room specifically dedicated to witchy stuff or things that they would need for like spells or anything like that. So I did this really kind of weird random thought where I took some candles and I wanted to make one of those like spooky stars on the floor that a lot of things get used with this time of the year. It's actually called a pentagram, and it gets plastered over like everything around Halloween time, but basically the very top of the star is symbolic of a spirit, and the other 4 points on the star are symbolic of the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. And it gets used like crazy around this time of year, so I thought it would be fun to kind of make one on the floor. It's also like something that if you watch any kind of show where they are depicting witches or somebody is making a spell, or maybe things where people are like playing with Ouija boards and doing like spooky magic and weird stuff around this time of year, that is something that people tend to mark the floor with. And I thought that it would be a fun little area to do something different in The Sims that you wouldn't really be able to do in any other kind of build. This is the only time that I would be able to make something like that. And I did add a like a podium from, I don't know, I was getting Charmed vibes when I was doing it. Has anybody ever watched Charmed? I used to be obsessed with it when I was younger. I'm not like one of those people that knows everything about it, definitely not, but I watched a lot of it when I was growing up, and I was like, I feel like they would have a room where they could specifically go to cast spells, and so I wanted to do something like that. I also just had a lot of the extra space, so I needed to do something with it. I could have built another bedroom, and if you don't like it, you definitely could take all that stuff out and just make another bedroom so it's a little more livable. Unfortunately, the thing that does really not work for this lot, and the fact that large portions of the home are built on a diagonal, I had a really, really hard time getting stairs to go up to the upper portions of this mansion. I cut a lot of it out, but I basically decided that only the bottom floor was going to be livable because the upper portions didn't connect very well with all of the roofing and all of the different stuff that's going on upstairs. And you definitely could add stairs, but they would probably have to be outside in order to get up to the upper portions of this mansion and to like the top portions of the tower. This is one of those builds where spiral staircases are so important and so necessary, but we don't have them, and unfortunately, it really limited kind of what I could do with this. So the bottom floor is kind of what we just have here for now. I think it came out pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with it. Actually, when I was looking at it, I did say to Nate that this was one of my favorite things that I have ever built in The Sims. It really is. I'm not quite sure why. I just think that the exterior looks really, really good, and I spent a lot of time using the clutter plants and all of like the weird stuff that we get from vampires to try to really make the exterior look very busted and kind of ugly, but in the best kind of way. And for the interior, I just went with a theme, and I reused a lot of the same furniture over and over again, which is something that I do not do routinely, but made so much sense for this house. and it really helped it feel very cohesive. And I just think that I'm getting a little bit better at making houses in general. Like, I went back and watched some of my earlier speed builds from when I first started building, and at the time I thought that they were so good, and now when I just went back and like looked at them, I don't know what I was thinking. Like, I left so much room bare, and I would do the weirdest stuff with some of the items in the game. And I always feel like my style has been a little bit different when it comes to interior design and just using like random items for random purposes, but I am so not happy with some of my earlier builds. And I was even thinking about doing a series maybe after the new year where I go back and re-fix some of them and do like a fixer-upper series, but on my own homes, because I recognize that they need improvement, and I think people would really like them a lot better if they came in like the styles that I have kind of figured out how to do now. Like, I just feel like I'm so much better, and I'm getting so much better, and I've learned so much more, especially after watching, like, I watch James Turner all the time, and I'm very much inspired by a lot of the things that he does, and he teaches me tons of things. Like, recently I talked about in a build that I have a super hard time with designing hallways and spaces in between rooms, and really just end up leaving them blank because I'm not sure what to do with them. And he did a whole video on things and ideas you can do for hallways, and that was super helpful for me because I struggle so hard. So I think I've really improved, I guess is what I'm getting at, and I really, really, really like this mansion. I hope you guys like it too. Let me know what you think of it down in the comments section below. It is available for download on the gallery under my origin ID, theallegedsimmer, all one word. It's actually called the Scooby Doo Mansion, and it does come with the mystery machine. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that little bell icon below to turn on post notifications so you can get updated every single time I post, and I will talk to you all in the next one.